Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 14 of the Football Guys Power Grid. No Dan Bach today. So you have the original, I don't know if it's the original crew, but it's certainly somewhere along the lines of what we've had in the past. Ryan Hester joining us, along with John Lee and Phil Alexander, as always. Looks like an interesting week this week. So I'm going to toot my horn because Dan always calls it out, but I actually won one of the DraftKings four-mans that we do, but none of you guys care about that. So let's go ahead and jump into the Vegas. What are we doing here, John? I mean, this is like the lowest week that we've seen in years. What are we doing?
It's we talked a little bit about this before the show, and I think collectively we're somewhat baffled about what's happening in the NFL right now with regards to team totals, game totals. This week we only have one game that's above 50 points, and that's the Buffalo going down to Tampa Bay. Josh Allen against Tom Brady. This is a really attractive game. Tampa Bay. Their implied team total is 28 points, and Buffalo's not far behind with 25. But after that, it's slim pickings. It's really strange. I mean, to be fair, the number one the number one team total on the slate this week is Kansas City against Las Vegas. We're going to talk about that. It'll be interesting to see what folks think about Patrick Mahomes. There's rumors that he's a game manager now. I'm not sure I buy into that, but Patrick Mahomes is he's $8,000 on DraftKings, and I think he's the most expensive quarterback on the slate. The question is, do you pay up for him in a game that they're supposed to win by 10 against Las Vegas? And there's some questions there. No 3-star teams at all in the passing game on the Vegas value chart this week over here on Football Guys. There's one 3-star running game, and that's Kansas City. But, of course, they split up their carries there with Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Darrell Williams. So not a real clear-cut answer there. And then there's 4 1-star passing teams. The Chargers, and there's a lot of questions about the Chargers right now because of COVID situations with their 2 primary wide receivers. You got the Cowboys and the Washington football team in an NFC East showdown, which typically these are low scoring, which I was surprised to see a Vegas total 48 on that game. And then you got a couple heavy favorites rounding out those 1-star plays. Tennessee hosting Jacksonville and Denver. I'm actually interested to hear what you all have to say about this game. Denver is a 10-point favorite over the Detroit Lions. I know the Lions are bad, but hey, they're hot. They just came off a big victory last week, and no respect in Vegas for them. They're a 10-point underdog against a Teddy Bridgewater-led Broncos offense. I guess the upside of all of this is there's a slew of defenses to choose this week. There are probably, looking at this, I'm guessing there are 7 teams projected to score less than 20 points. So interesting week. Maybe not a high-scoring week, but hey, all you got to do is finish at the top. If the other guy scores 3, all you got to do is score 3.1. So we're going to walk you through exactly how to finish at the top of those boards this week, and hand it back to you, Devin.
All right, so Ryan, we're going to start with you at quarterbacks. Not a lot of injuries here this week. I think we have Jake Fromm and Mike Glennon. They're trying to figure it out, but I don't know that anyone's going to care either way who actually starts in the Giant in New York. But Ryan, where are we starting for cash games? Are you paying up here at the top end with Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen? Might we go down to Taysom Hill or Cam Newton? Where are you going?
Yeah, so I mean, the answer to the Giants is just the Chargers defense, first of all. So we'll knock that out. Either way, I think we're good there. But I think your question was, kind of leads me to exactly where I was going. Is there's really no middle ground here this week, especially in a cash game situation. It's either, for me, it's Josh Allen or Tom Brady. Allen has the better matchup, but Brady is at home and has the higher projected total. Tre'Davious White being out for Buffalo gives them a little less teeth in that defense. And we've seen a million times in Tom Brady's career that the defensive matchup almost doesn't matter. He's going to do what he's going to do most of the time. And then also down at the bottom, Taysom Hill and Cam Newton are both interesting. I'd probably prefer Taysom Hill. Cam Newton stinks, right? So Hill does too, but he seems more likely to finish the game, certainly have a longer leash. His team is not too enthralled with his backup, even if he does start on a struggling, or even if he does start to struggle. So I agree with you. It is either pay up or pay down. I've made lineups where I like both, right? And I don't think we're sacrificing too much. So I'm curious to see what you other guys think. And then, the other thing that the other guy that I looked at, and shout out to you, Devin, because it's your boy Justin Airbear. But are we worried about him without his top two wide receivers? So is it worth getting off of him and just finding the money for Allen, or just going way down to those other guys? And speaking Phil's language, maybe will enough people go away from him that he becomes attractive in a different game, different kind of format. So he's somebody I looked at, but I'm a little nervous about those wide receivers, and I'm sure we'll talk about another wide receiver option on that team where we can get some indirect Justin Herbert exposure later in the show. But my preference so far is the Josh Allen or Tom Brady route, paying up and then finding value elsewhere.
John, are you paying up in cash?
No, I never pay up in cash. I'm off mute. Sorry, I never pay up in cash for quarterback when I think that I can get away with paying down. And this week, Ryan called both the guys I'm looking at. That's Taysom Hill and Cam Newton. Of the two, I like Taysom Hill this week. We got some questions around the running back position there in New Orleans, and we're coming off a week where Taysom scored. What did he score? Like 30 points last week, something crazy.
With 4 interceptions.
I don't care how many he had.
No, I know. It's amazing. It doesn't even matter how bad he is.
He throws 6 this week and comes up with 40 points. But no, I mean, I want to pay down at quarterback, and I've talked about this on the show for years now. If you can get away in cash, these guys are going to touch the ball 35 times. There's a lot of room for error where there's not as much room for error as at the running back and wide receiver positions where volume is not so guaranteed. And so I'm likely paying down in that 5K range for a quarterback, and it's likely to be Taysom Hill right now against a Jets defense that's allowed people to do a lot of things this year. And that will afford me the flexibility to do some different things and spending up at a position like running back or wide receiver.
Yeah, this seems like a week where it's really site dependent. On DraftKings, you're going to want the savings going from almost 8K down to 56, 54. I prefer Hill as well. FanDuel, you don't get as much of a discount going cheap at quarterback. So Taysom Hill's 7,700 compared to like a Tom Brady who's 8,200. So I don't know if I would go Brady against Buffalo. I know Tre'Davious White is out, so there's some questions there. Maybe you want to look at Mahomes or Justin Herbert in that matchup. But I do think Taysom Hill on DraftKings is the consensus cash game play this week. Phil, where are we starting with GPPs? And then Ryan and John jump in with guys that you like to add in there.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you guys talk about Taysom Hill and having you come to a unanimous agreement that he's the cash game guy, because that usually does inform GPP ownership, right? The guys that are heavily owned in cash are also going to be the ones that are heavily rostered in tournaments. And my initial thought as I was looking at the slate was that Justin Herbert was going to be like really popular for a quarterback. And I was thinking that because of the fact that everybody likes Justin Herbert, he's typically a fairly public quarterback. And the fact that he's going to be missing, it's a little bit unclear actually what's going on. There's talk that Keenan Allen might actually be able to clear the COVID protocols. Mike Williams looks more likely than Keenan Allen to clear those protocols. So I don't think he's going to be without both of those. But my lean right now as of Thursday would be that Allen sits and Williams starts. And that gives Herbert a really cheap wide receiver 1 at 6K with Williams for stacking. And then to double stack them, you've got a very cheap Jared Cook. You've got even like a Josh Palmer or Jalen Guyton who are going to be on the field a lot. And my thought was that we're going to see like 15 to 18% Herbert stacks. Am I off in
I have
picking
him
that?
at 8% right now.
At 8.
So I have Cam Newton at about 15 and Taysom Hill at about 13.
Okay. So those guys and the savings, I guess, were going to be a little bit more popular than I might have thought, and that's going to take
it all
away
comes
from
down to
it a little
Austin
bit.
Ekeler. I think Austin Ekeler is going to be incredibly popular. We're going to talk about running backs in a minute, but I think he's their wide receiver 1 this week if
But
Keenan Allen doesn't play.
And can't you stack him with Herbert too, though? You know, it's not like they're negatively correlated. So I don't know. I just thought that it was going to be like Chargers galore out there, and people would have some questions about Taysom Hill after the 4 interceptions, and especially Cam Newton. I mean, the last time we saw him, the guy was benched for PJ Walker, and his offensive coordinator got fired over the bye week. You know, how do you get fired on your day off? So
Friday reference.
Yeah. So I don't know. That was kind of my thought on where people are going to head. I think it was either up to Herbert, down to Hill or Newton, like you guys said. And I think that leaves the rest of the top tier a little bit underexposed for tournaments, particularly Josh Allen strikes me as a good tournament play. Lamar Jackson was sharp last week. I noticed him on a high percentage of professional rosters. He didn't come through. Maybe he could again. He's certainly got a top 3 ceiling, and he's going to be very low rostered. That's really all I've got. I mean, I'm probably going to be mixing those quarterbacks that we talked about together and trying to get different elsewhere.
Yeah,
So
Lamar.
Cool. Just for the record, I want to just wrap up something there. Devin, you said you had Justin Herbert where at what number?
I had him 8.
Yeah, one of our competitors, just looking up various folks, have him at 13%, which would be highest on the week. So, these numbers typically equilibrate coming into the weekend, but I think he will end up being popular for all the reasons you've said. I mean, he comes out really high in my model as well.
Yeah. I mean, the difference between 8 and 13 is not much, right? So it can very easily flip between somewhere in the middle ground. Who knows? But I think people are going to settle more on the Taysom Hill, Cam Newton bandwagon as the week gets further along, simply because they're going to want to play some of these higher end running backs, or they're not going to be comfortable playing. We'll get to wide receiver in a little bit, but it's pretty bleak in the middle ground. So, John, any other GPP names that you wanted to mention before we go on to running backs?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've got a couple here that come out high for me, and as I've always said, that my quarterback rostership really depends on what I'm doing at the wide receiver position, and the wide receivers that I like this week play for Seattle, Jacksonville, and the Kansas City Chiefs. So as a result of that, I like
all bad offenses, by the way.
Yeah, they could be bad.
Imagine saying that a year ago about 2 of those 3.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, Russell Wilson has not looked himself. I don't think he's thrown for 300 yards in maybe since week 1 or week 2. But for that reason, he's going to be completely overlooked in GPPs. And he's going up against the Houston Texans defense that's absolutely horrid. You've got Trevor Lawrence in a game that he should be throwing the ball maybe 40 times, and all of his receivers are uber cheap. And then you've got Patrick Mahomes, who apparently has turned into a game manager and hasn't thrown a lot of touchdowns of late. I'm not ready to give up on this guy. And because he's so expensive, I actually think he's going to be overlooked, believe it or not, despite the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs have the highest implied team total on the board this week on the main slate. Go ahead, Phil. You didn't like one of my calls, which is...
He crushed Vegas the last time they played, too. Like, Mahomes' only good game in the last 2 months was against Vegas.
It seems like he crushes them every time they play.
I think you're right. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in on Trevor Lawrence. I mean, how many times are the Jaguars going to be implied to throw the ball 40-plus times, and how many times are we going to watch, like, Urban Meyer, like, tuck it into Carlos Hyde's gut in the fourth quarter and just watch the entire thing, like, vanish in front of our eyes? I mean, I do like I like one Jacksonville receiver a lot. We'll talk about him later. but I think you could get your Trevor Lawrence exposure via the wide receivers and just leave him out of your plans.
So the only other name, and Phil, you mentioned him briefly, that I really like this week. I do really like Lamar Jackson going up against Cleveland. You look at these two teams. So the Browns are playing. They played the Ravens, then had a bye, and then they're playing the Ravens again, sort of in a weird scheduling quirk. Lamar Jackson threw for 4 interceptions the last time that they met. He did run for 70 yards. So if he doesn't throw 4 interceptions, he could easily top 100 yards rushing. I do think that the Browns are somewhat susceptible. Their pass rush is very good, but their secondary and linebacking core does leave a little bit to be desired there. So Lamar Jackson also hasn't scored a rushing touchdown since week 2, so there could be some positive regression.
Are you running him naked, Devin?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I don't have any of his receivers as being.
I think the only way he hits it is if he runs for like 140 and 1 or 140 and 2, and then you get some passing in there too. He's like the only guy that I would ever run naked.
Yeah, I mean I'm in support of that. I think if you're running him naked, that's fine. But if you do that from a game theory perspective, you really need to load up on whether you're doing a lineup builder, you're building your lineups manually. You need to do a lot of correlation everywhere else because it's really difficult to win these tournaments with a naked quarterback at this point. If you're playing like the Millie Maker with 200,000 lineups, because I don't like any of his receivers this week, even Mark Andrews. So
yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
could I throw one more out there? I don't mean to cut you off. This one is kind of like a harebrained scheme, but I'll just throw it out there that Teddy Bridgewater, John mentioned it at the jump. Denver is a 10-point favorite at home against the Lions. That's a good spot for quarterback scoring, and depending on how the injury report shakes out, we might see mega chalk in the Denver backfield, which means that their passing game would provide all sorts of leverage in a pretty good spot. So don't love it.
It wouldn't be the power grid if Phil Alexander was not talking about the Denver Broncos. Okay, let's jump into running backs. Some injuries to note. It seems like the 49ers are sort of banged up. Elijah Mitchell and Jeff Wilson are both questionable. If one of those guys misses, one of them could be interesting. If they both miss, Jermichael Hasty may be interesting. But I think the big news here, it seems like Melvin Gordon is going to miss, which leaves Javonte Williams all alone. So we shall see if Gordon does miss with his hip issue. But John, where are we starting at running backs this week?
It's a position this week that's interesting because as I look at my my chart here, 7 or 8 players very, very close in terms of points per dollar, really, really close. So this comes down to first your roster build, right? If you go heavy on a quarterback, like some of you talked about earlier, you're going to try to spend down here and maybe go to somebody like Javonte Williams. We'll see. Maybe Javonte becomes the free square this week, depending on what happens with Melvin Gordon at practice on Friday. But Antonio Gibson's not far behind him in terms of points per dollar at this point. Even Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley. I was really surprised to see Saquon Barkley.
We're really doing that?
No, I'm not saying I'm just talking about points per dollar. The ones that I like are more expensive. I'm doing a narrative here, Devin. You have to let me get to my.
You know what the words Saquon Barkley do to me. Just because you're now a Penn State grad, and congrats, by the way. I don't know if it's official, but you can't start jumping on the Saquon Barkley bandwagon at this point.
You can't finish a sentence if you say that name.
I was really surprised that he was. He's right there. Looking at this, he's third and not a distant third, like almost neck and neck with Javonte Williams, which is going to go up because if Melvin Gordon is out, that's going to go up, and Austin Ekeler. So Austin Ekeler is the guy I want this week in cash. He's 8,300. There are a lot of questions about that backfield, and as you guys have already talked about, he could be the wide receiver 1. Justin Herbert's going to feed him at 8,300. So this is one of the reasons I want to spend down at quarterback so I can jam in his $8,300 salary. And then I want to go with this is really going to set Devin off, or maybe not. Maybe now you come to realization that Leonard Fournette is a legit RB1 at 7,400 at home against Buffalo. They have a 28-point implied team total. The guy's been getting fed. He's been playing well. I know you don't like to admit it, but at the end of the day, he's a pretty solid player for the price this week at 7,400. So those are the guys. As we're building through, Taysom Hill 5,600, and then I'm going to stack him up with Austin Ekeler and Leonard Fournette at a higher price, 83 and 7,400. And I'm going to avoid some of the landmines that we talked about with Javonte, Antonio Gibson, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley. Those guys all kind of scare me unless the one exception being if MG3 is out, then I think you can really get exposure to Javonte Williams in cash.
Okay. I don't hate Leonard Fournette. The price has just gotten so prohibitive that it worries me based off of his consistency.
No,
I would
disagree.
Well,
I don't have my red guys anymore because I'm not a regular.
So
He's 7,400 and he is the RB1 on a high scoring team. We talked about Vegas earlier. There's only one game with a total over 50. He's in it.
You can't find $500 to go to Alvin Kamara versus the Jets.
Who's coming off of an injury? I mean,
with no Mark Ingram, are they really going to run Tony Jones out there? The guy's awful.
Taysom Hill doesn't throw to running backs; he runs instead. Kamara does not have great splits with Taysom Hill. Fournette played 87% of the snaps last week, 76% of the team carries, ran a route on 76% of dropbacks. He's had over 20% of the team targets in 2 of the last 4 games, and the other one was like 16%. I mean, he is the guy in the offense. And he's
if you're watching from home and this is your first time in a while, write this down because Ryan and I never agree on anything. This has to be this has to be.
Devin and I disagree more than you and I, though. I guess I disagree with people. Who knows? But no, for Devin, Fournette is the guy on a really elite offense. I mean,
the Jets have allowed
where we don't have Jonathan Taylor.
The Jets have allowed 22 touchdowns to running backs this season.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, I think his point's valid though, Devin. With Taysom Hill under center, they get inside the 10-yard line. There's a real possibility that Taysom Hill's the guy that runs it in, right?
Yeah, I'm going to take both.
You're going to do both what?
In cash, I'm taking Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill. The Saints score 28 points. I get all the touchdowns. It's safe. That's how I'm starting. I'm going Austin Ekeler, Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara, and Javonte Williams, and figuring the rest out. If you want to go Leonard Fournette, that's fine. I have no issue with that.
Seems like you do.
No, I really don't. I just the price is a little too high for me. I want more consistency from the running position. I know he catches a lot of passes. I understand that, but he hasn't topped 50 yards rushing in 4 of his last 5 games. So
okay.
I mean, if we look against the Giants in the game that they scored 30 points, he had 35 yards rushing and 39 yards receiving, didn't score a touchdown. So I think Alvin Kamara is more likely to score a touchdown than Leonard Fournette.
Is Alvin Kamara going to play a full? I don't know the answer to this. Is he going to play a full bevy of snaps after missing 5 weeks of
Mark
football?
Ingram's on the COVID list.
He's been practicing fully for 2 weeks. So I think they've held him out for just getting him right. And with Mark Ingram being out, they're not playing Tony Jones.
I mean, Ty Montgomery though has been getting.
He's also on the COVID list.
Oh, is he? Ty is? Okay, well then.
We're splitting hairs here, guys. I mean, let's just move on. If you want to play either one of them, I think they're both fine. I just prefer Kamara over Fournette. Maybe it's a little bit of a bias. I'm sure it is. Phil.
Maybe.
Ryan.
Yeah.
Actually, let's go to Ryan. Let's close out cash. I'm just going to ignore Phil for a little bit, and then I don't want to hear any more about Leonard Fournette, and then we'll go into GPPs.
Phil's still victory lapping for his preseason Fournette take, and rightfully so. It was a good take. I think we talked about the top, and you're right, trying to get 2 of those guys in. I think both John and Devin said that, but there's going to be folks who don't necessarily want to do that. So that kind of middle layer is intriguing to me. You mentioned Antonio Gibson. So if J.D. McKissic is out again, we saw Gibson was a workhorse last week. I think he's viable. It's 6,000 on DraftKings. And then Josh Jacobs, who Kenyon Drake is now out for the year. So Josh Jacobs is now, I guess, a 3-down running back again. He was targeted on 25% of passes last week and ran a route on 71%. So believe he had 8 catches last week, which I looked at the game logs and Josh Jacobs with 8 catches. Wow, that's something we should at least take note of. So I think those are your 2 guys in the middle if you're interested.
One thing, J.D. McKissic's trending towards playing.
He is. Okay. So Gene's article was midweek. Admittedly, it was yesterday. Said maybe not. But if McKissic plays, then definitely not. Gibson, especially if Melvin Gordon doesn't play, because for $100 cheaper, you're on Javonte Williams. So I think the decision tree is pretty well set there. One guy that's interesting, and it's probably GPP only because it makes me feel a little icky inside, is 5,100 Deontay Foreman against Jacksonville. He's the running back for Tennessee who likes to run and probably wants to get back to what they're doing. They've had a really tough go of it ever since Derrick Henry was out. And last week on this show, I said I think that the Rams will have a get-right game against Jacksonville. And I said that in the context of talking about Cooper Kupp and doing what they want to do. And they did that. And if Tennessee wants to get back to what they want to do, I think it goes through Foreman. It's not going to feel great. He's not going to catch a lot of passes, if any. But Foreman going for 100 yards and at least a touchdown would not be one of the most shocking things I've ever seen.
Bill, where are we going
at for conviction?
Go ahead, John.
I'm sorry.
No.
For what it's worth, my opinion on Hilliard or Foreman are not strong. But I am curious to hear what you guys think about the Cowboys running back situation. Right now, Tony Pollard looks like he's a game-time decision. He's been the superior back. I guess the question is, how bad or how good do you think Ezekiel Elliott is at this point? If he's got the entire backfield to himself, the Cowboys are 4.5-point favorite. They've got the 4th highest implied team total in Vegas. Are we playing Zeke if Tony is out? Is he chalk?
I don't know I don't know if he gets the chalk because of the price and because of the what would you call that, vividness bias? Where people remember the last thing they saw, and the last thing they saw was Zeke limping around on live TV while Pollard was, dusting him for long touchdowns. I think it's really, really interesting, right? Because that top price tier is going to belong to not Kamara, to Ekeler in tournaments, right? And you definitely want to look for price pivots in that range. And the 2 guys that come to mind immediately for me were Ezekiel Elliott and Alvin Kamara, and they both come with huge question marks. But then they also come with their backups probably not being able to play, so where do you find that balance? I think when it comes down to it on Sunday, if we know that Pollard is out, I am guessing I'm going to have a good amount of Zeke just because of the touch projection. It's going to be super high. So on GPP running backs, I think a lot of good ground has been covered. I'll throw a couple of other things out there in regards to what's already been said. In Tennessee, I saw that Jordan Wilkins signed, and I haven't been paying close enough attention to that to know if he's going to be active, if he's going to be in the rotation. But Jordan Wilkins, formerly of the Colts, is probably already the best running back on that roster, including Deontay Foreman and whoever else they have in that backfield. I mean, maybe Hilliard actually looked pretty explosive on his snaps, but I don't know. That could throw a wrench in the plans, but right now I threw up the yellow black-eyed Joe for Ryan because Foreman does come up pretty high for me. The game script should certainly be there. And then with Josh Jacobs, the pass catching thing has been a trend. So even before the 9 targets after Drake went out last week, he was seeing 4 or 5 catches a game for a couple weeks straight there. which is good. But Jalen Richard was out last week. Looks like he's going to be active this week. I don't know. I would say that Jacob still looks good for minimum 3 to 5 catches, but Richard might pick up more of that. I don't know that we're going to see another 5+ catch game out of Jacobs. In terms of leverage, I think you could look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Mahomes, Hill, Kelce, they have their fans every week. I think in particular Hill should be very popular, and of course Mahomes stacked with Hill. I'm expecting the Raiders. I mean, listen, if they don't adjust what they did against Kansas City like 3 weeks ago, that allowed Mahomes to like run rampant for 40 points, then shame on them. So I would imagine they're going to try to let the running game beat them. And should that happen, the Raiders can't really stop the run. So CEH, even though there's a timeshare, he's the base down back. Since he came back 2 weeks ago, he's got 70% of the rush attempts, 65% of the touches overall. I think that's enough. He just needs to get in the end zone. And if he does, I think he's a really good play in GPPs. And I know I'm rambling, so I'll cut it short after this. But the the other one is Joe Mixon. He's got this early week illness that we got to watch. And he's never a sharp play on DraftKings because he does not catch passes. And he's always more highly rostered than he probably ought to be. But I think this week he won't be because he's coming off a not so great week. He's got the illness. He had a little neck injury. The 49ers aren't really an exciting matchup. But I don't know. I see most of Cincinnati's TDs coming on the ground this week.
So Phil, talk to me about Nick Chubb and Cordero Patterson because those are the only 2 running backs you didn't mention.
do you really want me to talk about them?
No.
Let's jump into wide receivers, guys. And Ryan, I need a break from Phil's rambling. Where are we going at wide receiver?
Yeah, I mean, I think we alluded to it earlier, but if either Keenan Allen and or Mike Williams do not play, seems like Jalen Guyton would be the next man up for the Chargers, who are projected to score quite a few points against a really bad Giants team. 26.5 points, which is 3rd on the slate, I believe. Guyton had a big game last week, caught a deep touchdown against Cincinnati in what was a really torrid start for the Chargers there. So I think Guyton is somebody you're looking at, but certainly, it's Thursday night now, so keep an eye on things there. The other one that I have a couple that I kind of looked at from a GPP perspective because I think we alluded to that the middle tier is less than desirable here at wide receiver. But somebody I'm looking at this week, just in terms of getting a little bit of cheap exposure to kind of the marquee game, is Cole Beasley. So Tampa Bay DBs are not hey John, Tampa Bay DBs are not great. You cannot run on Tampa Bay. They're a pass funnel defense, and they play a ton of zone. And Cole Beasley is a guy who just beats zone, and he's only 5,000. So if you're looking for a non-Steph Diggs guy to partner with Josh Allen, or just really a seat filler, for lack of a better term, at wide receiver, Cole Beasley's somebody. And then really even deeper in that game, and this is purely a kind of a peripherals play, to steal a buzzword from our industry here, is a receiver for Tampa who played 84% of the snaps last week and ran a route on 90% of the dropbacks, but had, I think, 1 catch. And that's Brashad Perriman. So he has taken on the 3rd receiver role for a team that plays a lot of 11.
Ryan has been muted for talking about UCF players. John, talk to us about wide receiver.
I didn't even say anything about UCF. He's Tampa's 3rd receiver.
I will say that Brashad Perriman caught me by surprise. I immediately went. I don't even know these in my player pool, but I'll look that up.
Should be.
Look, we're talking cash game players. Go to the wide receiver 1 there in Tampa Bay. Chris Godwin has been just on fire, and he's only 7,100. He's probably $1,000 to $2,000 too cheap. Other guys in the mid range, I don't know. I mean, it's not terrible. DJ Moore, going up against Atlanta at 6,200, I think is in play for cash games. Brandon Cooks against Seattle is another guy that just continues to do nothing but catch passes, and he's only 5,700. And then I think Phil was going to tout, maybe, I don't know, Visca. Is that who you like on Jacksonville? There's a different player, huh? Oh, how about that? For what it's worth, I do like most of their receivers this week. But if you're playing in cash and you need to save some cash, Visca Chenault. So those are the guys. I do like Ryan where he started. That was with Jalen Guyton. But those are my cash game players, and I'll hand it over to Phil for his GPP selections.
I'll add in a couple of cash game plays real quick. So I think Jarvis Landry at 5,400 could be interesting. Coming off a bye, he had 111 yards in the prior matchup against the Ravens. The Ravens secondary is really banged up right now. That no Marcus Peters, no Marlon Humphrey. They're both out for the year. They're looking like they're going to start some guys off the practice squad. The Browns showed that they have no answer for the running game, as Nick Chubb had 8 carries for 16 yards in their last matchup. So I think if the Browns are going to move the ball, it's going to be through Landry. John?
How many touchdowns does Jarvis Landry have this year? Don't look.
1.
0. I think he's a heck of a sorry, Joe. A heck of a GPP play this week. Maybe in cash.
He's going to be popular.
You think he's going to go? You think he's going to get popular?
I have him at 14% right now.
Jarvis
Competitors have him at about 18%.
Jarvis Landry.
Can't see that happening. If he's that high, then he's not a good GPP play. But he hasn't scored all year. I think there's some positive scoring regression in his future. I like to call Devin. That's all. I just wanted to be relevant by the time it came back to me.
And then the other player that I'll take, I don't believe in this Denver -10 nonsense. I think that Detroit is playing hard. I think that they're building on some things. Jared Goff didn't look terrible. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown at 2.5% rostered. I don't know that I can get there in cash, but at 5K, I mean, he's effectively their number one receiver, and he had a massive game last week. It might be point chasing a little bit, probably is, but I'm going to take a shot on Amon-Ra St. Brown in a GPP this week. Phil, I'll hand it over to you, and then Ryan will go back to hear more about nonsense.
I also like the Jarvis Landry call insofar as him possibly having a big game, but I had him pegged well below 10%, probably topping out around 6 or 7. And at that point, I think I wouldn't mind playing him. So my favorite GPP play, and it kind of occurred to me as we were talking about the Dallas running back situation, is Amari Cooper, because the answer there might be if Tony Pollard is out and we're looking at a hobbled Ezekiel Elliott in the running game, Amari Cooper is now healthy. He's all the way back after a long layoff from COVID. He was a little bit limited last Thursday night when we saw him, but he should be ready for a full complement of snaps, and he is cheap, way too cheap. I would say by a solid $500-600. So I think he might actually be the guy there. Maybe they just finally pass the ball, and Cooper's real cheap. Other guys in that 6 to 7K range, because I think that John said DJ Moore. I think he's going to be popular. Godwin at 7,100 is going to be popular. Renfrow, assuming Waller is out, he's getting expensive, but I think he's probably still going to be popular. So looking for leverage in that range, outside of Cooper, I guess you could throw CeeDee Lamb in the same boat, even though he's a little bit more expensive. DK Metcalf should start doing something eventually, and against the Texans, who have no one to defend them, that's a pretty good time. You got Mike Evans, leverage on the Godwin chalk. I don't mind Jamar Chase. I think we'd probably be looking at him a little bit differently if he hadn't bobbled a 70-yard touchdown, knocked it back to a defender, and caused it to get intercepted last week. And because I'm talking a lot again, I will wrap it up with my Jaguars receiver, who is not Laviska Shenault, because Laviska Shenault's ADOT is like behind the line of scrimmage. It's negative. Laquan Treadwell is the wide receiver one there. Whether the world is ready for it or not, the last 2 weeks, Laquan Treadwell has snap shares of 86 and 93%, routes run percentages of 86 and 91%, target market shares of 20 and 18%, just about double-digit DraftKings points in both games, which is no great shakes, but he's 3,400, and I think there's upside this week because the Titans' secondary is terrible. The last time that we saw them, Kendrick Bourne looked like some sort of superstar wide receiver. So if you give me the same Laquan Treadwell usage that he's been getting against these Titans, I think we could be looking at 15 to 18 points there, which is plenty for a GPP.
There's no chance. But I will say this about Laquan Treadwell: he is the second worst name that we had in this wide receiver section. Rashad Perryman would be the worst in this section.
If you're taking a first-round bust, take the one that's 400 cheaper attached to Tom Brady than the one that's attached to Trevor Lawrence. That's all I'm saying.
Ryan, anything else that you wanted to add here?
How could I possibly add anything more?
Let's jump. John, are you good?
Yeah, I'm gonna stop. I think these guys they've mined the fields pretty well.
Okay, so to summarize, cash games, it sounds like DJ Moore, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Guyton, if one of Mike Williams or Keenan Allen is out. Are we aligned to that? Or do we need both?
I like Josh Palmer.
You like Josh Palmer. Okay. Jarvis Landry, potentially, and then Chris Godwin. Anyone else I'm missing for cash?
Treadwell is not out of the
Okay, we're going to tight ends.
Devin ends working the manual mute button tonight.
Yeah, we're trying to keep this show on the rails here, boys and girls, because no Dan Bach, it's a dangerous situation. All right, tight ends. And John, we're going to go to you. Some expensive tight ends this week. Are we paying up? Can we pay up? Is there guys down low that you like enough to – one of these top-end guys seems like they might go off, but where are we starting?
Yeah, I mean, look, for cash, I'm probably spending down. It's my typical – I mean, you've been watching the show long enough. I spend down at tight end and because it's highly volatile. I spend down at quarterback because it's forgiving, and I spend up at the other positions. And if I'm doing that, it's Jared Cook, 3,200 on a team that are a lot of question marks at the receiver position. He's top of my board right now in terms of points per dollar value. And then I touted this guy a few weeks ago, the second guy on my cash game list, and I think I caught some slack that week, and he delivered. And that's James O'Shaughnessy, 2,900. He's last week he had a big week, and we're talking about these Jacksonville receivers being good value this week. That's the way I'm going to go. I will say there's not a lot I like at the top end this week. Devin, I know that was kind of how you led into this, and maybe I'll just complete out or round out my tight end thoughts with regards to how I'm treating some of those folks. Rob Gronkowski, he's been red hot, no denying it, but he's only about 6% to reach GPP value this week on his $6,000 salary. So if his ownership gets above that, then I'm going to be fading him. And Kelce is right around the same area. So I think I'm going to be spending down in both tournaments as well as cash games at this position this week.
So RotoGrinders, I'll shout their ownership projections out there. They have Kelce and Kittle both at 7%.
That's about where they should be.
So at the top of the board, James O'Shaughnessy at 15, Austin Hooper at 13. Ryan, over to you.
When did James O'Shaughnessy have a big game. I'm looking at his game logs. He was 2 for 13 last week and 3 for 29 the week before, and then nothing since week 2. So
John's old age is confusing him with Dan Arnold. We'll give him a break.
No. I actually remember this pretty clearly because I shouted out John twice last week in his absence. One was the Leonard Fournette victory lap that we both should have taken together. So I took one in your honor. And then the other one was when I touted James O'Shaughnessy last week. I said, shout out to my boy John Lee. And I think it's because that does go back to week 2 before Dan Arnold came along and before O'Shaughnessy got hurt.
Week 1, he had 6 for 40.
Week 1, he had 6 for 40.
There it is. Right. So I think John was on that the following week.
So it's December 9th. That was September 9th. So, like, what are we doing? It's Austin Hooper. It's not Jarvis Landry on. It might be Jarvis Landry a little bit, but Hooper's going to score the touchdown after Landry gets him down there. And the Browns are without. They're very tight end heavy. They're very wide receiver light, but they're without 2 tight ends this week, very likely. And Hooper's probably going to be the only guy. And he's 3,400. There's just. I'm finding. I forget the price difference. What is it? $500. I'm finding the $500 to steal some of Devin's more frequent lines. I'm finding $500 to get from O'Shaughnessy to Hooper if I'm paying down. So the other guy that I like,
Cook or Hooper?
Probably Hooper because I'm probably playing Guyton already, and maybe that's bad process. But if I have Guyton in the lineup, I'll probably diversify away from some Chargers because I'm probably gonna have Ekeler in the lineup too. So that's a lot of Chargers. I'm with you on Cook. It makes sense if you're not playing Guyton, play Cook. But that's why I'm leaning Hooper. The other one that's a possibility there in a similar price to Hooper is, and I feel like this is my guy, so apologies here, but every time I'm on the show, Logan Thomas is hurt. So it's Ricky Seals-Jones at 3,600. The guy's hyper athletic, former college wide receiver, played every snap when Logan Thomas was out earlier this year. Logan Thomas has avoided an ACL injury, but is likely to be out this week. Now, Ricky Seals-Jones himself was inactive last week, so pay attention to it. But if he's the Washington tight end, he is, probably the Washington tight end. So he's somebody to look at as well.
Can I just quickly chime in on what I was saying earlier? I need to defend myself. Ryan's absolutely right. I called out a big game for O'Shaughnessy. What I wanted to say was he's only been active for 2 weeks since returning from injury. The first week he had a 12% team market share. Last week he was the number 1 guy on the entire team in terms of team market share at 21%. It didn't equate to anything or a lot. That said, I'm quite happy to still roll with him. So just for clarification's sake.
Yeah, I'll drop one more note on O'Shaughnessy, and that's that it didn't turn into anything because he really sucks. Like I watched, I watched a good part of that, and he was dropping passes, like he was in the wrong place. Like the guy's bad, but they're trying to get him the ball. They try to throw to tight ends there. So I'm down. I'm down with
our
it.
Listeners to go to Footballguys and type in the top right corner James O'Shaughnessy and go see his player profile picture on our website, and you will not play him in DFS.
We'll do that now.
It's brutal.
All right. So
one thing, and then we could jump into GPPs. I do like Travis Kelce this week. I know I said he was washed a few weeks ago, but the Raiders have struggled against the tight ends. They've struggled for the tight ends like seemingly forever, but they've allowed 3 touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, and right before that, they allowed 119 yards to Travis Kelce. So I think if someone is going to have a big day and if the Chiefs get right, I don't know that I can play him in cash just because I don't know that I can afford him. I'm probably going Austin Hooper, but in a GPP setting, I do think that Travis Kelce is somewhat interesting, especially since it seems like all of the wide receivers are inflation, like the whole rest of the world. Like Hunter Renfrow is like $6,800 right now. It's crazy.
61.
Travis Kelce at 74, like he has as much upside as any of the guys that are in that range.
But I thought you said he was washed up. I need to clarify.
Except for the Raiders.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a rule that like when he plays the Raiders, it's fine.
I got
Fountain of youth.
No.
Yeah, their linebackers are in fact the fountain of youth. I think GPPs is pretty cut and dry. Just if you want to get unique and have upside at the tight end position, just spend 5,500 or more. That's where you've got Kelce, you've got Kittle, you've got Gronkowski, who is definitely not going to be a sharp play like John said, but he's been defying the odds all year. Even I'm going to say it and piss Devin off. Kyle Pitts. Sorry, Joe, but also a sharp play last week, although he didn't come through. One guy that I thought would have been on your cash game radar for DraftKings.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Kyle Pitts didn't come through.
He didn't come through. That doesn't mean he was a bad play.
Isn't that the trend of like this entire year? Like, how many times are we going to say Kyle Pitts didn't come through? We say it every week. What are we talking about?
We're talking about that he was in a solid percentage of professional DFS players' tournament lineups last week because he was a good play. Sometimes the good plays don't materialize.
Sometimes they get it wrong.
Like James O'Shaughnessy last week, and sometimes they work out. So yeah, Kyle Pitts still a good play. I was surprised that you guys didn't mention Gerald Everett. I thought that at his price, possibly a viable pivot off of someone like Jared Cook in that matchup up against the Texans. Russell Wilson's been looking his way a lot since he returned. What about Foster Moreau? Last week's busted chalk. I think I'm assuming Darren Waller is going to be out. He hasn't practiced again this week. Moreau was a horrible tournament play last week at 30+%. I'm just wondering, does the tight end variance level out on a week where nobody's going to be looking his way anymore?
He's too expensive. It's too expensive.
You think the price hike did it to him? Okay.
Yeah.
There's a good chance that is accurate, but I just don't think we should forget about him altogether.
I've already forgotten about him. All right. Let's jump into team defenses. Phil, we'll start with you. Let's not name all 28 defenses on this slate. Who do you like at defenses?
All right, so cash games looks to me like the Browns and the Seahawks. GPPs, I like the idea of kind of going against the grain of the chalky quarterbacks because they could just as easily turn the ball over a lot. And that's playing the Jets against Taysom Hill and playing the Falcons against Cam Newton. Kind of a good way to leverage that ownership. And then the last one for tournaments I like is the Bengals. I just think they have a frisky defense that never gets too popular.
John?
Yeah, I like Seattle against Houston at home, Seattle at Houston, 3,100 for cash games. And then I like the last defense that Phil referenced for GPPs, the San Francisco 49ers, not the 49ers, but the Cincinnati Bengals going against the 49ers. The 49ers, to be fair, have scored a lot of points over the past 5 weeks, 33, 17, 31, 30, 34, 23. People are going to be scared to go against them, but they've got some questions on offense. Deebo Samuel's been hobbled. They've got no running backs right now that are healthy. They're playing on the road in Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's only 2,900, and they're going to be overlooked. So that's my GPP recommendation for the week.
Ryan?
Yeah, Phil mentioned the one that I like a lot for kind of either format, and that's the Jets. They're only 2,500. Taysom Hill stinks as a quarterback, so perhaps kind of the mega correlation play is actually playing Taysom Hill and the defense against him, even though that's counterintuitive. Dallas scored 18 last week. I believe 14 of those were in the final 3 minutes of that game. I know because I was playing against them in a season-long league, which no one wants to hear about. But it was painful to watch Taysom Hill throw balls, coming from behind. And they may not be behind in this game, but anytime he's throwing, you're going to hold your breath. So there's a world where Taysom Hill scores 20, 25, and the defense he plays scores 10 or more as well. So I like the Jets quite a bit there. And then on our single lineup builder here, just poking around, the Panthers keep showing up. hosting the Falcons. They're 2,900. No, where am I? 2,800. Hosting the Falcons, who just kind of have no one to throw to, including Kyle Pitts. Sorry, Phil, but it's a Falcons team just with a dearth of weapons, and are they really going to put up? It just seems like a floor play, having anyone against the Falcons. You've got kind of a quarterback who can't run, throwing to players who aren't super good. So that one pops out as well.
And for me, just take the Ravens in GPPs. Baker Mayfield is not a good quarterback. So, okay, that'll wrap us up. Any last words, guys? On to week 14. Exciting week. Difficult week.
I got one. We didn't really discuss what you're doing with Taysom Hill if you wanted to play him in tournaments. Who you're stacking him with. Devin, you mentioned playing him with Alvin Kamara. I think I get that for cash games and that you get all of the Saints' offensive production. I don't know that I could get there in tournaments just because it doesn't correlate. They kind of cannibalize each other. I think it's interesting to note Deontay Harris, I think his name's Deontay Harris, right, is out. He's suspended, and he's kind of been their best weapon in the passing game over the last couple of weeks. So for as much as Taysom Hill is going to throw, my assumption is that it's going to go to Traquan Smith. And I don't think that anybody's going to be on him, even though Hill is chalky. So just one last little nugget for you.
I did not mention that UCF player.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple other guys. Who was it? Like Lil Jordan Humphrey had a big game a couple weeks ago.
Great name.
Like
Definitely a great name.
He's the player I would recommend, by the way. He's the one most likely to hit GPP value.
He seems to possibly score the touchdown if they're going to throw one, but I don't know. Maybe the answer is fade Taysom Hill in GPPs and don't stack. I don't know that he has maybe he does have the ceiling based off of his rushing upside, but is he going to throw 300 yards? Probably not.
No.
Never.
Run for
maybe
100.
the answer.
You're hoping he scores a touchdown and you're hoping he gets 100 yards rushing. He probably won't, but
You need 2 rushing touchdowns in GPPs, I would think.
Yeah, I agree.
So maybe the answer is fade him or do the Lamar Jackson treatment and hope for 100 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. But I don't know that I would waste a roster spot on Lil Jordan Humphrey or it seems like you can get other guys in that price that are going to outperform. Even it's stacking. There's like smart stacking and then there's stacking just to stack. And I don't think that's a smart stack.
But think of the story, right? If you win the Millionaire Maker with Lil Jordan Humphrey, you've got to buy his jersey and you can wear that forever. It's a whole thing.
Yeah. John, anything as we wrap up here?
No, I don't think there's anything from me. I was going to say, I will say that I think, where do you have Elijah Moore, Devin, in terms of rosters?
Good point.
I'll use RotoGrinders just because I have it up right now. They have him at 14%. I think I'm a little bit lower than that, but I think I'm like 10, 11.
We don't talk about it a lot on the show, but I'm always big on fading the right guys because that's as important as anything, especially if you're playing more than, I don't know, a dozen lineups or so. And I typically play 150 lineups. So he's a guy, as of today, I'm going to fade. As much as I like his talents, he's getting too popular. People are jumping on that bandwagon. And if he stays as high as what you've just quoted, that's too high. You should stay away from him.
Okay. Cool. Ryan, anything? Thank you for joining us this week.
No, thanks for having me. UCF hate and all. For the record, I didn't bring them up. I just brought up a player.
I mean, okay. with that, we will wrap up. Thanks everyone for listening. If you're still listening at this point, here in week 14, 59 minutes into the episode, we appreciate you. And if you're not listening, then it doesn't really matter. So with that, I will wish everyone the best of luck in week 14 and hope the variance goes your way this week. Thanks, everybody.